Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Reclamation Project, where we believe in no soul left behind. Ever felt that surge of adrenaline from anger? As if you've tapped into a superpower. Unbridled, it can lead to catastrophe, but harnessed properly, it becomes a potent means of communication. Even God has known anger, albeit handled in the right way. Professor Michael Buffington is up today, and he's going to explore the distinction between well placed and misplaced anger.
What's up, T? Always a
Mm.
pleasure here on the Reclamation Project. How much time I got today?
Man, it's on you, man. I told you in the green room, like I've never heard it this way, so it had me. You really have my ears itching to see what this presentation is going to be like.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll try to keep it around 45 minutes.
Okay, okay, okay.
All right, brother. How's it going, folks? I want you all to pray today because I am using my cell phone once again and forgot to charge it, so I'm a little low on power, but God provides all the power. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the subject of anger today because this is something that affects all human beings. There is nobody that is immune to anger. There's nobody that does not suffer from anger. Even the calmest people at times have moments of weakness where they struggle with anger, and anger is not always a bad thing, you know. So what I want to do is I want to discuss the subject of anger in a deeper way than most people think about it, and maybe get you all to think as well. So here's the first question. Is it ever under any circumstances, is it ever okay to be angry? And the first thing that we have to understand is that emotions themselves are actually a gift from God. I mean, can you imagine going through life and not feeling anything, like ever? Like, how terrible would that be? So emotions are actually a gift from God. When you feel joy, when you feel happiness, when you feel love, when you feel peace or whatever, right? But negative emotions are different. Negative emotions are the result of living in a sinful world with a sinful nature. Positive emotions were literally designed, by God to enhance our connection not only to God but to each other as well, and to enhance our physical health. Right, the Bible literally says that laughter is good for the bones. Right, it's good for your health. Laughing actually boosts the immune system. We know that. This is science. I'm not making it up. So if you want to go look that up, you can look at how laughter and positive emotions actually expedite the healing process. Whereas sorrow and resentment and bitterness actually have a deleterious effect on the health. Again, this is science. Go fact check me. Emotions also bring depth to our character. I mean, you ever see those people who walk around and they're just kind of monotone all the time, not very emotional about anything, and they're not the most fun, most interesting people to be around. But emotions bring depth to character. They're designed by God essentially to bring fullness to our lives. But the problem is this, and this is coming from a Judeo-Christian perspective. Obviously, I believe in God. Obviously, I'm a Christian, so I also believe in Satan. And what I believe is that Satan is absolutely determined to destroy us and our happiness, and to deny us the bliss of eternity. And one of the ways that he does this most effectively is by twisting and distorting human emotions. One of his favorite emotions to attack is the one that we're going to talk about today, and that's anger. It seems to be the emotion that Satan, above all others, can use to cause the most damage. Because with just the right set of circumstances, Satan can use anger to tear apart um, families, friendships, and some of y'all know this firsthand, even churches, right? And anger can absolutely obliterate that foundation of love that God designed for our relationships to be built on. So, but having said that, I want to make one thing clear. Anger in and of itself is not bad. You got some people out there. I've heard people say this from in churches in the pulpit, that throw your TV away, all TVs are bad, and things like that. And I'm not sure that I follow that logic or I agree with that logic, because is the TV bad, or is it how you use the TV that's bad? The same thing can be said with anger. As a matter of fact, one of the most common verses that people will use when in the Bible when they're dealing with the subject of anger is from the book of Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 26. And the apostle Paul literally says, "Be ye angry and sin not, let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil." Now what's very interesting is he never said that anger in and of itself was bad. He said, basically, if you're angry, that's fine, but don't add sin to your anger, right? Be ye angry and sin not. Neither let the sun go down upon your wrath. In other words, deal with it quickly, and neither give place to the devil. Because as soon as you allow that anger to take root and to fester, now you're opening up the mind to Satan, right? But one thing that Paul never said, he never said anger is bad, because it's not. Um, an author by the name of William Barclay, or a theologian by the name of William Barclay, he actually said something very interesting in his commentary on this letter to the Ephesians. He says that there must be anger in the Christian life. There must be anger in anybody's life. You should be angry sometimes, but it has to be the right kind of anger, right? Now think about it. If you saw somebody who could witness uh you know pain and suffering and wrongdoing and be emotionless, something would be wrong with that person. There would be something essential that is missing from the person who has completely lost the ability to be angry. Now, when we're talking about people who just have a bad temper and who are just cross and angry and ornery all the time, we're not talking about those people, because being having a bad temper, being irritable, and just being a nasty person, that's indefensible. There's no defense for that. What we're talking about is something called righteous indignation. Okay, there is a difference between sinful anger and righteous indignation. Um, Righteous indignation has made the world a better place. It was righteous indignation that forced a group of mothers who had lost their children and their spouses to drunk drivers to form the group called Mad Mothers Against Drunk Driving, right? And that group lobbied to get stricter laws passed to prevent people from getting behind a motor vehicle and driving drunk and killing people. So that made the world a better place. In fact, it was the anger of abolitionists who saw the mistreatment of African slaves that caused them, that actuated them to get up and fight for our freedom. And now here we are as Black people, over 150 years later, removed from slavery because the anger, the righteous indignation of the abolitionists. So I'm very thankful that those people were angry, but they were angry in the right way. So that's what we have to understand. There is a difference. Um, and as a matter of fact, um, in the book of Desire of Ages on page 310, the author says something very powerful about the subject of anger. The author says, it is true that there is an indignation that is justifiable, even in the followers of Christ, when they see that God is dishonored, that his service is brought into disrepute, when they see the innocent oppressed. A righteous indignation stirs the soul. And here's what it says: such anger is born of sensitive morals, and it is not a sin. You see, so there's a difference. There is a difference between just being mean and nasty and irritable and having a bad temper and having righteous indignation in the face of something wrong. Um, but those who at any supposed provocation feel at liberty to indulge anger or resentment are opening the heart to Satan. So that's what it was talking about in Ephesians when it says, "Be ye angry and sin not, neither let the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil." Because you're literally, if you're walking around feeling that you're free to just uh fly off the handle, start cursing people out, talking to people crazy just because you're easily irritable, you're opening the heart to Satan. And I don't know anybody that wants to do that. It goes on and says, bitterness and animosity must be banished from the soul if we would be in harmony with heaven. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be out of harmony with heaven. So I mean, that's something that, all of us can work on. Um, and Malcolm Little, he brings up the story about Jesus turning over tables to the money changers. And it's funny because I have had people bring that up almost to try and justify wrongdoing. It's strange. They like to treat the Bible like a buffet and pick and choose what they want for their own convenience. And I've asked people, do you know why he did that? The reason why Jesus did that when he was in the temple was because this is supposed to be the house of God. And what was happening was these money changers who were working for the priests were ripping people off because they were coming from faraway places. There were pilgrims coming from who knows where and who knows how far, and they were coming to the temple to do to perform the ritual sacrifice. Obviously, you're not going to bring an animal from that far away, so they would purchase animals at the temple for the purpose of sacrificing. But in order to purchase the animals at the temple, they had to convert their currency, whatever it was, into the temple currency. And the money changers were ripping them off in that conversion. So they were getting far less than what they should have. And Jesus saw this, and that's why he said, my Father's house is supposed to be a house of prayer, but you've turned it into a den of thieves. So he was furious when he saw that. It was despicable and it was disgusting. And so he turned over those tables because he said, absolutely not am I going to allow this to continue to see these poor people getting ripped off and taken advantage of in the name of God, no less. So that was a great example. Thank you, Malcolm, for that. That was a great example of righteous indignation. Um, but Larry Yeagley, who wrote a book called Beyond Anger, he gives us a very good description of what anger is. He says anger is healthy when it alerts us of danger or a threat to our self-respect. And then on page 19, he points out that anger and other positive emotions provide us with a heart to reach out to the downtrodden and disenfranchised. Emotions stir us to anger or to engage in causes to promote justice and peace. Um, to put it simply, anger is a physical preparation in the face of hurt, frustration, and threat. It is a high state of alert that signals something is wrong and that needs to be dealt with. An otherwise neutral preparation for situations that clash with our sense of justice, fairness, and security. Anger is a feeling that we should not confuse. Listen to this. Anger is a feeling that we should not confuse with the destructive behavior that can result from it if abused. right? So anger in and of itself is not necessarily bad, but if we do certain things, if we combine sin with that anger, now it is bad. And very destructive things can happen as a result of that anger. As a matter of fact, all over the world and all over the United States, there are people sitting in jail cells, rotting away for the rest of their lives simply because they could not keep themselves composed in the face of some sort of hurt or some sort of disrespect. Now, I can guarantee you, every one of those people who has been sitting in jail 10, 20 years will look back and say, man, that wasn't that big of a deal. That wasn't that big of a deal. And here I am, and my life has been ruined. I'm not able to see my family. Maybe I'm not able to see my children. I'm not able to earn money to support my family. I'm sitting here rotting away in a jail cell because I could not control my behavior in the face of anger. And this is why it says anger is a feeling that we should not confuse with the destructive behavior that can result from it if abused. Right? Angry feelings, he goes on, says, do not hurt other people. Only certain ways of expressing them do. You know, you all, I'll give, maybe for lack of a better example, um, you see a lot of people that want, for example, gun control. Um, and they say, you know, there's all these gun crimes and things like that, and so we need to get rid of guns. Um, but it's not the gun. It's the person operating the gun or holding the gun or using the gun that is the problem. You see, so anger in and of itself is not necessarily bad. It's certain ways of expressing that anger that is bad. Um, as with anxiety and depression, those along with anger are signals that something needs to change. Okay. Um, but again, I'll make this clear that just being having a bad temper and being irritable, you know, and walking around angry all the time, that is indefensible. Um, so you're probably sitting here, you know, maybe there's, you know, some things that are you know, you're worrying about. Oh, let me bring this up real quick. This is another quote from Larry Yeagley on Beyond Anger on page 21. He says the situation with aggression, however, is different. So now he's moving on from anger to aggression. Says the situation with aggression is different. However, it involves behavior that seeks to threaten or injure someone who has been offended or who has offended or hurt us. Destructive in nature, it always produces negative results. If if it should have any benefit, the negative far outweighs it. So if there's any benefit to aggression, the negative far outweighs it. In aggression, both parties can get hurt, as I gave you the example of the people who are sitting in jail right now because of the consequences of their aggression. They're acting out on the anger or acting out in the face of disrespect. Aggression in whatever form is an acquired strategy for dealing with anger, not a biological inevitability. Did you hear that? You don't have to get up and punch somebody in the face who has disrespected you. Um, and that doesn't mean that you walk around allowing yourself to be stepped on. That's not what he's saying. You know, I always tell people very clearly, you don't have to respect me, but you're not going to disrespect me. You understand? I always tell people, like, there's certain things that I will and won't allow, and disrespect is one of them. So what do I do then when somebody disrespects me? Do I get up and sock them in the mouth? Like, that's what I used to do, right? And why did I do that? Because I was afraid. You see, the root cause of anger and aggression is fear. What was I afraid of? I was afraid that if I didn't deal with this swiftly and violently, that people were going to think I was a punk. And if people thought I was a punk, then more people were going to do this. And it didn't feel good. I didn't like the way that being disrespected made me feel. So I was allowing my feelings and the fear based on those feelings to dictate how I responded to that disrespect. And it was a very unhealthy response. It was a learned strategy for dealing with the anger, but I didn't have to do it. Now, when I was in the streets, that worked for me. They used to call me Little Tyson because anytime somebody would say something crazy to me, I wouldn't ask questions. I would just be like, "What you say?" Bam. And that was it. We were rumbling, right? And people started to learn, don't mess with him. He's crazy. And what they meant by that was this dude will fly off the handle. And so I thought, yeah, that's right. People respect me. People didn't respect me. They just feared me. You see what I'm saying? And there's a difference between the two. Now, that worked for me when I was in the streets, but then I became an adult. And I wanted a better life. So I was trying to move into different spaces in life where I could, step my game up, where I could elevate and have opportunities to progress in life, to be able to provide for my family and do things like that. And I realized that as I entered these spaces, there were still people that were going to disrespect you, that were going to do things to you that weren't right. But the responses that I had previously in the face of anger and disrespect didn't work anymore because the consequences were too great. There was too much to lose. I would lose, opportunities. I would gain a reputation, for being a certain type of person that would keep me from opportunities. And so I realized that I had to actually unlearn all the things that I learned, all the strategies for dealing with anger that I learned, all the aggression, the violence, and all that stuff. I had to spend my entire adult life unlearning. And I would say it was not until I set foot in a therapist's office exactly 10 years ago. And I'm talking about almost to the day, 10 years ago, that I began my journey on truly overcoming anger. There was an article that I found on the subject of anger. I called Maturing into a Man of God. Amen to that. Amen to that. There's an article called 10 Signs That You Might Be an Angry Person. Because here's the thing. Many of us have moments when we get angry. That's natural. We talked about that, especially when you're a good person, when you have a moral compass and you have a connection with the Lord. You cannot be silent in the face of righteous indignation. We know that the only thing necessary for evil to win is for good men to do nothing. So righteous indignation is what moves us, what actuates us to deal with certain things. But there are a lot of us who are actually angry people and we don't even realize it. We think because we don't kill anybody, because we don't get up and punch anybody in the mouth or whatever, that that we're okay. But in actuality, that's not the case. And this article really points out 10 signs that you might be an angry person. And so I wanted to just walk through those a little bit and discuss them. The first one is that you constantly judge people. Not everybody who is angry is walking around screaming their head off. Okay. Some people don't even look angry. But a mental health expert by the name of Ryan Suave, he says, some people filter their anger into less obvious but still troubling attitudes and behaviors. Anger can manifest with outward rage and screaming and yelling and throwing things, or it could also be this kind of inward retreat where you're judging and really kind of righteous about everything. So where do you see that kind of anger? You see it everywhere. You know where you see it a lot? In churches, right? When you see those people constantly browbeating, looking down on people who are struggling, who are suffering, and judging others, or when you see people who are constantly talking about people, oh, look at her, she got this problem. Look at him, he's doing this and doing that. And, when you see people who are constantly judging others inside, they're angry. and there's a deeper issue connected with that. There's toxic shame, and there's all sorts of other things. But that's one sign, is that you're constantly judging people, and we all know people like that. In fact, some of us may be people like that. Another sign that you might be an angry person is that you don't necessarily yell, right? But you might withdraw. Okay. So there's a clinical psychologist from New York by the name of Nanika Kaur. And she says that people with long-standing anger problems may not scream or be outwardly hostile, but they may instead be passive aggressive or have a tendency to retreat, right? Some people, she says, are not explosive in their anger. Some people are withdrawing in their anger. So because they're angry, what they do is, instead of screaming and yelling, what they do is just shut down. Don't talk, walk away and go to the other room and don't communicate anymore. So that's another sign. The third sign is that you replay events and assure yourself that you were right. How many of us do this, where we get into an argument, or we have a situation, and then we sit there, with this sort of event being played on loop in our minds, and we're sitting in the shower and we're washing our hair and we're thinking about that argument and how we should have said this, and how you know what I'm talking about. You all know what I'm talking about. It says here, if someone cuts you off while you're while you're pulling into a parking lot, getting angry is fine. But if you can't let the incident go hours or days later, it's time to reflect. It says, if someone has done something to hurt me or scare my kids, it would be perfectly fine for me to be angry and do what needs to be done. But if 3 days later, I'm still thinking about what I should have said or what I did, it's a sign that I'm an angry person. Some of us are listening to this and thinking, that's me. And that's fine. If you're having that reaction to what I'm sharing with you, that's amazing, because introspection is the first step in overcoming. Goes on here. It says angry people treat these moments like they're Jim Garrison watching the Zapruder film on loop. Zapruder film, that's the film where John F. Kennedy was murdered by the CIA. I mean, I'm sorry, James Earl Ray. That's the official story. Anyway, it says they want to make sense out of what happened and construct a narrative when they're the good guy who was unfairly mistreated. Often they enlist people in the event after the fact, sharing the story to garner support of their belief that they were wrong. In other words, they go to people and rehearse the story over and over to say, I was wrong, right? Isn't that terrible? Don't you think that person is an awful person? And people say, yeah, that was wrong, and things like that. So they're rallying support. It says, I want to be right because that kind of makes sense and makes the emotion that I had appropriate if I yelled and screamed and chased him down the highway. Rather than being ashamed of it, I can feel justified. It makes sense of that emotion. So, in other words, a lot of times people will react with anger. They'll scream, they'll swear, they'll call you out your name, and when you say, hey, that was wrong, they say, no, because you did this, this, and this, and you made me feel this way or that way. There is no justification for that. That is indefensible. You see, that aggression in the face of anger is wrong. Now, when I talked about the example of me earlier, I tell people, hey, you don't have to respect me, but you're not going to disrespect me. Now, I used to, like I said, one of my strategies was punching people in the mouth. It worked when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. As a man, doesn't work. Okay. So what do I do now? Now, I oftentimes, I remain stoic in the face of that kind of disrespect, and I will let people say what they have to say, and I'll say, "Are you done? Did you say everything you had to say?" Okay, let me clarify. And I try to in a logical, very calm and respectful way, because I want to model the behavior that I want from them. I try to engage with them in order to try and rectify the situation. Sometimes I might add humor to the situation. I just, you know, okay, is that what we doing here? Come on now, so sometimes it's appropriate to try and add a little humor into the situation to try and get somebody to come down. And sometimes you just have to walk away. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what, I'm not here for that. I'm not okay with this type of communication. I'm not comfortable with this type of communication, and I would never do that to you. So I'm gonna leave. And when you're ready to communicate with me in a manner that and create an atmosphere of mutual respect, I'm happy to talk. But right now, this ain't it. That's how you deal with that. Um, but screaming and yelling and cursing and swearing because somebody made you feel this or this and that or whatever, that's not an excuse. And we have got to get past this this idea that, oh, somebody can make you this or make you that. Nobody can make you do anything. Oh, he made me feel this way. No, he didn't. That was your choice. It was your choice to respond in that way. It was your choice to perceive their words in that way and assume what their intent was. I had a discussion with a friend last night, and this friend that goes back when we were little kids, and still, very close family friend. And they were venting to me, about some issues that they were having. And I tried to share a perspective, and they got angry. And it was because they weren't hearing what I said in the spirit that it was intended, and they were, infusing that and assuming that I meant something else, and then insisting that that's what I meant. And I had to say, no, I need you to when you feel like that, ask me for clarification, because oftentimes either um either you misunderstood what I said and you need some clarity, or or maybe I said something in a way and I wasn't even aware that I offended or hurt you. And you just need to express that, and that way I can apologize and fix that. But getting angry and saying, no, you made me feel this way, or what you said made me feel, no, you have to take responsibility, because as soon as we say you made me feel this, at that point what we're doing is we're shielding ourselves from taking any responsibility for our actions in response to that thing. Now I can yell and curse and swear and maybe even put my hands on you because you made me feel this way. You have to stop saying that. Nobody can make you feel anything. Nobody can make you do anything. You do it because that's the chosen strategy to deal with anger and disrespect. And it's one that you have not unlearned yet. Simple as that. Um, Number four, you feel victimized all the time. You ever met those people? Oh, everybody's here. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit because the article used a little language that was colorful. It says if you run into a jerk in the morning, it means you ran into a jerk. We all run into people like that. Maybe they're having a bad day. Who knows what's going on with them, right? Try not to judge, because see, judging, you're gonna run into people that are gonna upset you at times. Pain is inevitable, right? Being hurt, offended, and upset is kind of an inevitable part of life. It'll come, it'll happen. But how we respond to that, and whether or not we choose to hold on to that and be resentful, turns that pain into an abiding torment, right? Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And yes, we will on occasion run into people who are having a rough day, and maybe they might be rude or mean or short or whatever it is. Um, and it says you may run into a jerk if you run into a jerk in the morning, you ran into a jerk. If you run into jerks all day, you're probably the jerk. So in other words, what it says here is people with anger problems have trouble kind of understanding that, and they're constantly assuming that everybody's out to get them, that they're being targeted for abuse that they don't deserve, and there's nothing that they can do to stop it. You know, angry people, they live like life is happening to them, like they're always the victim of something, and it's always the other person's fault. It's never their fault, it's always the other person's fault. Why? Because when we deflect the responsibility for how we feel, it gives us carte blanche to respond to that situation or event in unhealthy ways. And that's not okay, especially for somebody who claims to be a Christian, because there is no such thing as a loveless Christian. I will say that again. There is no such thing as a loveless Christian. And this is why Gandhi said, um, I like your Christ. I do not like your Christians. Ooh, it stings. It stings, right? Um, another one. You can't handle feeling vulnerable. Okay. So it says here that problematic, like lifelong, if you have serious anger issues, doesn't occur in a vacuum. It doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. Um, and they say this, and this is very interesting. And I kind of spoke to this a little earlier, but rage is often the public face of secret, deep hurt, right? So a lot of times when you see these people, they're walking around, they're angry, they're yelling, they want to fight all the time. Oh, what you saying? All that stuff. You think, oh man, that's a bad dude. Don't mess with him. That dude is tough, man. And in actuality, they're scared. They're wounded. They're deeply hurt. Maybe as a child, they were deeply hurt, and they this is their chosen learned strategy that they acquired to deal with that, because on some level it sort of worked for them. The problem is that it leads them damaged people. It leads them less, it takes away every time you respond, cursing, swearing, violently, aggressively, it takes a piece of your humanity away. And so it's not a good thing to do, but it's something that they do because they're trying to mask the hurt, the pain. And they bring up here in the article that it's deeply uncomfortable to probe the underlying issues, as they force you to reflect on your own behavior and acknowledge that you were in the wrong. People with anger problems wall themselves off from that discomfort with the anger that they're accustomed to. Unfortunately, those outbursts and attitudes often drive people away and makes self-reflection more difficult, which in turn makes the problem worse. um, Underneath it, they're probably really hurting. And so, for those of us who come across people like that with anger issues, who are constantly angry, some of them are in a church, some of them are in our family, we might be married to some of them, right? So, when we come across people like that who have those deep anger issues, what we have to do is, instead of saying, I can't stand that person, he always this, maybe you don't necessarily have to put yourself in harm's way and subject yourself to that abuse, but you can't say, hey, who knows what's going on in their life, or what they're going through, or what they're dealing with? Who knows what happened to them today? Who knows, right? Um, there was a there's a author by the name of Henry Longsford Wadsfellow, or something to that effect, and he said something like, if we could all look into the secret history of our enemies, we would cease to hate them yesterday, or something to that effect. In other words, in every single person's past are tragic, painful events that, if we understood them, would help us have a bit more empathy for them. We may not necessarily like them, we might not necessarily like to be around them, but we might just understand them just a little bit more. And that little bit of understanding may help us put down our sword when we're ready to cut them down. So, something to think about. Um, Number 6 is you're over reliant on coping mechanisms. Says some people with anger issues wind up using healthy outlets for stress in unhealthy ways. So if you have a bunch of stress energy in your body, you go for a run or work out really hard. It's going to feel good because it kind of exhausts you. But if you treat exercise like an exorcism, and you need hours of nightly punishment at the gym to get the demons out, take it as a warning. That should be a good sign that something underneath is going on. Another one, you're constantly sarcastic. um, Many years ago, and I'm talking probably 2 decades plus or something, there was a movie that I once saw called Anger Management. I think it was with Jack Nicholson and Adam Sandler or something. Anyway, um, uh, there was one line in the movie that was hilarious to me, but it made so much sense. Um, I guess this guy, I don't even remember what it was about, but the guy, Adam Sandler's character had anger issues. That's why the movie was called Anger Management. And he said something sarcastic to the therapist, and the therapist told him, he said, sarcasm is anger's ugly cousin. And I was like, what? Like how is sarcasm and anger connected? And then I thought about it and I was like, huh, it's true. You know, a lot of times when people are angry with you and they're resentful towards you and they have bitterness towards you, they will say things sarcastically to really express how they truly feel. Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Um, and in this article, it says, when you exclusively communicate through snide put downs, there can be more going on than just trying to be funny. Sarcasm again, has a place and can be funny, but if it's like a constant state of sharp wit, that's another pretty subtle sign, um, or sometimes not a subtle sign of anger. And they say, next time you start in on sarcastic humor, think about what you're trying to accomplish with your joke. Are you truly trying to be funny and elicit laughs, or are you just pointing out people's flaws because you despise them and you don't like this thing that they do or whatever, right? So that's something to think about, because sarcasm could be another mask for anger. There's a few more. Well, I'll read through them quickly. One is that you can't think rationally under stress. Another one is that small things bother you more than they should. You ever see people like that? Some small thing goes on and you freak out, and it's because you're an angry person. There's this boiling anger inside you. Another one that we should probably be aware of is that you love to criticize, right? You always talking about somebody, always criticizing somebody. It's like sometimes you got to just let people alone. You got to let folks grow. And so being aware of some of the signs that we have anger is important, because anger isn't always clenched fists, clenched teeth, and ready to fight. Sometimes anger is smarmy, sarcastic comments, or whatever. And the reason why it's important to be aware of this is because, again, the root cause of anger is fear. Anger is a mechanism of a fearful mind. People say, oh, that's not true. What are you talking about? And one of my friends actually challenged me on this. He goes, what if somebody, at my job, does something, wrong, and I get angry at them? Does that mean I'm fearful? And I said, yes. And he goes, how so? And I said, your anger is because you're concerned that this person who did something wrong that upset or offended you or whatever is not going to experience consequences for that, and they're going to get away with it. And he goes, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Because if somebody did something wrong and you knew, you might be, upset initially, but if you knew that they were going to pay the price for it, you would be like, okay, um, you do the crime, you do the time. But anger in that situation is the result of fearing that somebody's not going to get what they deserve. And a lot of us hold anger like that. When somebody's done something wrong, we think they're going to get away with it. Um, Many of us hold anger towards people who we don't even know, right? You see all these people. How many of us know somebody who hates Donald Trump, like passionately hates him, like a real legitimate anger and hatred towards John? You don't even know this man. Like, you don't even know this man. All you know is what you read in the headlines and what you heard in the news, and that's it. you know, and yet you walk around, and some of these people call themselves Christians. Strange. It's very strange. And then they look at me funny because I don't hate the man, and it's like, look, man, I'm trying to get through life without hating anybody, because I would like to get to heaven, and I know that one thing that won't be allowed into heaven is hatred. And if I'm holding on to hatred and won't let it go, you get where I'm going with that. Anyway, I'll read you a couple quotes about anger, and then we will end. That's just stuff to get the wheels turning. They attribute this one to Buddha. I don't know if it's true, but if that's truly him. But it says, holding on to anger is like grasping a coal, a hot coal, with the intent of throwing it at someone. You're the one who gets burned. Okay. Here's Ralph Waldo Emerson, the writer. He says, for every minute that you remain angry, you give up 60 seconds of peace of mind. See, this is what I tell people. It's like, you know, they're angry, they're walking around furious with somebody because they're doing this or they're doing that. And I said, man, let that go. No, but they won't change it. So let it go, man. Your peace is more valuable than that anger. And allowing this situation to fester and holding on in resentment is not doing you any good. Any good. And I know this because I've been in that situation. Here's another one. It says, this is by Seneca. I can't remember who that is right off the top of my head. Ancient figure, I believe. Says, anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. Oh, you didn't hear that one, did you? Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful than the injury that provokes it. Somebody does something or says something, and it hurts us and it upsets us, and we respond in anger. Sometimes we can respond with a nuclear bomb to something that was just a slingshot, you know. Recently, somebody did something to me that was incredibly disrespectful. Incredibly disrespectful. And I know a lot about this person. This person is an alcoholic. This person has a lot of issues. Let's just say that. I'm not going to go into all the issues, but let's just say they have a lot of issues. And I could have sat there and brought up all those issues and cut that person down. Right? And I would have probably devastated that person. I would have probably greatly upset them. And I would have walked away like, ha, yeah, I got you. But then when I calmed down, I would have probably been feeling terrible for having done that. And it would have definitely damaged our relationship beyond repair. And it wouldn't have made me a better person. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let that go. I said my piece. I said, look, you know, I said, we're not going to communicate this way. I need you to have respect when you're communicating with me and when you deal with me. And that's it. That's all. And I walked away. And I could have I could have cut that person down. But it wouldn't have made me a better person. It wouldn't have made me closer to God. It wouldn't have made me love them more. You know, it would have made me a worse person. It would have made me love them less, and it would have brought me further from God. So I walked away. Why? Because anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful than the injury that provokes it. How many times have we said things to our spouses, to our parents, to our children, to our family members in anger that just derailed our relationship for sometimes weeks, months, or even years on end? Right? Just one thing spoken in a moment of anger can harm some. There was a rapper by the name of Talib Kweli, and you know, I wasn't always in the church, so I used to listen to certain types of music, And there was this one song he had where he said, "Sticks and stones may break bones, but words break hearts." And that always stayed with me because I was raised to sticks and stones may break bones, but words never hurt me. Man, that is not true. That is not true. Sometimes some of the things that people have said to me have been so harmful in the past that I wish they would have just punched me in the mouth. Like that would have been better than what they actually said to me. That's how powerful words are. So again, anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful than the injury that provokes it. And I'll read one more from Marcus Aurelius. It says, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it?" Right? So this is why understanding what anger is, understanding the difference between anger and righteous indignation is extremely important, because you need one but not the other. And then how we, understanding the signs of anger, that we're an angry people, and being introspective so that we can deal with it, because that's the first step to overcoming is introspection. If you name it, you can tame it, right? Having strategies to deal with anger. My strategy is therapy, the gym, and Jesus. Right? The closer I am to God, the less likely I am to be like myself. And people say, "Well, I was just born this way." Well, you know what? My connection with God helped me overcome hereditary and inherited tendencies to sin and to evil. So I don't care that my father was angry and I was angry. I've now become a more stoic, a more calm person in the face of disrespect and anger, because that is what my connection with God does. People say, "Well, I don't believe in God." And I say, "That's fine, but I do, because he helped me." I've never heard an atheist say, or somebody who overcome alcohol say, "Oh, I was struggling with addiction for years until I found atheism." But anyway, that's another story for another time. But understanding what anger is and taking the steps to overcome it will not only improve your life, the quality of your life, the quality of your relationships, but it will improve your relationship with God. And I'll say this one last thing. It's a Chinese proverb, and it says, "If you are patient in one moment of anger, you will escape 100 days of sorrow." So anyway, that's it for today. I hope that makes sense and that got you all to think. I don't know what you think, G.
Man, once again, you didn't disappoint, man. I just have a quick question before you go, because you gave us the list of 10. And so I was just wondering, from a therapeutic standpoint, it's normal, I would imagine, for a person to exhibit at least one of those traits. And I'm not saying in any event that we shouldn't go and seek some type of help, because, clearly you should want to better yourself.
Right.
But my question is, when should one really, really be concerned? I mean, is it like if you got 3 out of the 10 or you got 4 out of the 10? You know what I mean?
I would say if you have 1 out of the 10,
Okay.
you you should be concerned, because typically any of these signs, if we have any one of these, it
Hmm.
could be an indicator that there is an unhealed wound in our past. And so, that unhealed wound, even though it seems very small in the beginning, could
Hmm.
turn it big enough to keep us out of heaven. And so
Right.
I would tell people is, don't take chances, dot the I's and cross the T's, because we don't want anything to keep us out. I had this same friend that I talked about that I was speaking to. I said, one of the thing that got them angry was that I had recommended that they find a therapist to help them deal with some of these things.
Hmm.
And they said, I went to the therapist, I went to a therapist. I went to her 5 times. It didn't work. And I was like, oh goodness. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's like being 300 pounds and going to a personal trainer 5 times, and I didn't
Right.
lose. It,
Right.
it takes time. But yeah, I personally would say, man, if any one of those things resonated with a person and they felt like they had one of those things, they should really consider looking more deeply into therapy. And I don't just think therapy is for crazy people. Dr.
Mm.
Oler, who is a very famous,
Right.
well-known
I know
therapist.
Dr. Oler.
Dr. Oler's famous saying is, "Everyone needs a checkup from the neck up." So,
Hey, listen, thank you again, Professor Mike, man.
my
Again,
pleasure.
you didn't disappoint. I can't wait to see what you bring to us next time. Blessings on you, man. We won't hold you. Continue with your Sabbath, man. Peace and
All right,
blessings be
brother.
upon you. All right. Thank you, folks, for being with us. God willing, you will join us again next week.